Officer shot a man at the gas station. He had no idea he was an Army major.
Stop! Get down from there! I'm not armed!
I didn't know. I swear I didn't know.
Sitting in the defendant's chair in the 9th District Courtroom, Officer Garrett Voss wore a crisp suit and carried a confident, almost arrogant smirk on his face. He believed he was untouchable, convinced that his badge gave him a free pass for violence. But the man he had shot in cold blood at a quiet gas station was no threat at all. It was Major Julian Rains, a decorated Army Ranger who had survived multiple combat tours only to be cut down on American soil. This is the story of a tragic injustice, a desperate cover-up by corrupt officials, and the explosive trial that tore apart a rigged system and let karma deliver its painful reckoning. On a cold, rainy night in the quiet suburbs of Oak Creek, Major Julian Rains, a Bronze Star recipient and father of 2, was exhausted after a long drive. He was out of uniform, wearing a simple gray hooded sweatshirt and dark jeans, behind the wheel of a rented Ford Explorer on his way home from visiting his ailing mother. He had some driving left before he would see his wife Elena and their children, and he just needed to stop for gas and a cup of coffee to keep going. He pulled into a brightly lit but empty Chevron station near the interstate. The neon lights hummed overhead, reflecting off the wet pavement. Julian stepped out, paid with his card, and started pumping fuel. He carried himself with discipline, his posture straight and his movements calm and deliberate. Not far away, Officer Garrett Voss was patrolling in his cruiser. Voss was a veteran of the Oak Creek Police Department, a man with a heavy chip on his shoulder and a long record of excessive force complaints that the police union had managed to keep buried. Voss had a reputation for aggressive tactics, a quick temper, and prejudices he did not bother to conceal. When he spotted the Ford Explorer at the pumps, he saw a tall, athletic black man in a hoodie. Without any real reason, he ran the plates. The system showed a minor administrative hold on the rental car. Nothing serious, but for Voss, it was enough. He turned off his headlights and pulled into the lot, positioning his cruiser to block the vehicle. The spotlight from his car hit Julian square in the face, blinding him. "Step away from the vehicle," Voss ordered through the loudspeaker, his tone full of hostility. Julian, who had faced far worse in combat zones, stayed calm. He placed the nozzle back, raised his hands to chest level where they could be seen, and turned toward the light. "Good evening, officer," he said steadily over the rain. "Is there a problem here?" Voss got out of his car, his hand already on his unholstered Glock 19. "I told you to step away from the damn car. Keep your hands where I can see them." "My hands are right here where you can see them," Julian replied calmly. "I am just getting gas. This is a rental. My wallet is in my back right pocket. I have my military identification and driver's license with me." "Shut your mouth," Voss shouted, moving closer. The rain was soaking his hair. His eyes looked wild and paranoid. "Do not reach for anything. Turn around and put your hands on the roof of the car." Julian began to turn slowly. "I am turning around. I am an active duty military officer, sir. I am not armed." It was the right way to de-escalate, but Voss was not interested in peace. He wanted control through fear. As Julian placed his hands on the wet roof, Voss came up from behind, yelling more conflicting commands. "Get your identification." "Show me your identification now," he yelled. "You just told me to keep my hands on the roof," Julian said, his voice firm now, the tone of a major who was used to command. "Which one do you want me to do?" "Do not talk back to me," Voss snapped. He lunged in, grabbing Julian hard by the shoulder of his hoodie and slamming him against the car window. Startled, Julian tensed to keep his balance on the slick ground. He did not fight back. He simply steadied himself. "He is resisting," Voss shouted to no one in particular. Julian turned his head slightly. "I am not resisting. You asked for my identification. I am going to reach slowly into my back pocket with my right hand to get it. Gun." He is reaching for a gun. Before Julian's hand even moved past his waist, the night exploded with 3 loud gunshots. Bang, bang, bang. 3 bullets fired at close range struck Julian Rains in the chest and stomach. The impact threw him backward onto the wet concrete, where the rain began to mix with the blood pooling beneath him. Julian looked up at the dark sky, his breathing shallow and labored. He did not grab at his wounds. He just stared at the officer standing over him, smoke rising from the barrel of the gun. "I told you," he whispered, blood at the corner of his mouth. "I was reaching for my identification." Voss stood there breathing hard. He did not try to help. He did not apply pressure to the wounds. He grabbed his radio instead. Shots fired. Shots fired. The suspect reached for a weapon. "I need emergency medical services right away." A man who had survived explosions and firefights in distant war zones bled out alone on the pavement of a suburban gas station, holding on to nothing but the cold, rainy air. In the minutes that followed, the station filled with flashing lights and crime scene tape. Sergeant Victor Lang, Voss's supervisor and longtime friend, was the first to arrive. He found Voss pacing near his cruiser, pale but strangely composed. "What happened here, Garrett?" Lang asked, pulling him under the canopy out of the rain. "It was a routine stop on a flagged plate," Voss lied smoothly, the adrenaline helping him stick to his story. "The guy was non-compliant, sweating, acting agitated. He spun around and reached into his waistband. I saw something dark. I had no choice, Victor. He was going to kill me." Lang nodded slowly. He walked over to the body. Paramedics had already confirmed that Julian was gone. They had cut open his hoodie. There was no weapon in his waistband. There was no weapon anywhere on the ground. The only thing in his back pocket was a brown leather wallet. When Lang opened it, the Department of Defense military identification card shone under the bright lights. "Major Julian Rains," Lang muttered. He walked back to Voss. "Garrett, he is clean. He is military. An army major." Voss's eyes showed a flash of panic, but self-preservation took over fast. "I swear he had something. Maybe he kicked it under the car." "Right," Lang said slowly. The code of silence was already locking into place, built on loyalty and corruption. "We will secure the scene. Go sit in my cruiser. Do not talk to anyone else." By the next day, the Oak Creek Police Department put out a carefully worded press release. It described an officer-involved shooting after a confrontation with a non-compliant suspect who made the officer fear for his life. They released Julian's name but left out his military rank, his clean record, and the fact that he had been completely unarmed. But Elena Rains was not the kind of woman who would accept a press release as the final word. When the military notification officers and an Oak Creek detective came to her door, her world fell apart. Her grief soon turned into a fierce, unyielding anger when she read the news reports that tried to paint her husband as some kind of violent criminal. She hired a sharp and relentless civil rights attorney named Damian Holt. Holt immediately demanded the body camera footage from Officer Voss and the dash cam from his cruiser. In the days that followed, Chief Preston Ward held a press conference. "It is with deep regret," he said in a prepared tone, "that we must report a technical malfunction during the incident." Officer Voss's body camera was dislodged during the struggle and stopped recording just before the shooting. The dashcam view was blocked by the suspect's vehicle. Still, based on the evidence and the officer's account, the shooting appears justified. Officer Voss is on paid administrative leave while we complete the review. It was a classic cover-up, clean and predictable, but they made one serious mistake. They did not know about the night shift clerk at the Chevron station, a young college student named Jordan Reyes. Jordan had been terrified when the shots rang out. He had ducked behind the counter. When the police arrived, Sergeant Lang came inside, showed his badge, and demanded access to the security recording room. Lang ordered Jordan out of the room, spent some time inside, and then left carrying the entire recording device with him as evidence. What Lang did not know was that the station had recently upgraded its system. The cameras recorded to the physical device in the back, but also sent a backup to a secure cloud server controlled by the franchise owner. On top of that, Jordan had been watching the live feed on his tablet under the counter the whole time. He was scared of the police, but the image of a man dying on the pavement stayed with him. In the time that followed the shooting, after seeing a plea from Elena Raines in the newspaper, Jordan bought a burner phone and called attorney Damian Holt. "Mr. Holt," Jordan whispered from his locked bathroom, "the police are lying. They took the hard drive, but I have the cloud login. I saw everything. The officer attacked him first. The man never reached for anything. He just stood there with his hands up." Holt's heart raced. "Jordan, I need you to download that footage immediately. Put copies on 2 separate flash drives. I am coming to you right now." When Holt watched the silent high-definition video from the camera above pump number 4, he knew he was looking at the end of Garrett Voss's freedom. The footage showed Julian Raines calm and compliant. It showed Voss rushing him, grabbing him, and then shooting him in cold blood without any real threat. Holt skipped the local district attorney, who had close ties to the police union. He went straight to the state attorney general, a tough prosecutor named Quentin Hale, who had made his name taking on corrupt local police departments. The response was swift. A grand jury was called in secret. They watched the tape. In less than an hour, they returned an indictment. Months after Julian Raines was killed, Officer Garrett Voss was sitting in his kitchen drinking coffee, still expecting to be cleared and back on the job soon. Then the front door was breached by a tactical team from the state police. Voss was thrown to his own kitchen floor, handcuffs snapping tight around his wrists while his wife screamed in shock. The charges were read as he was pulled to his feet. Murder in the second degree, official misconduct, and tampering with evidence. In the months that followed, the city of Oak Creek became a powder keg. Protests filled the streets for weeks. The courthouse was ringed with concrete barriers and state troopers in riot gear. Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Miranda Vale, a no-nonsense judge with many years on the bench, presided over the trial. At the prosecution table sat Attorney General Quentin Hale with his team, and beside them sat Elena Raines, her posture straight and strong like her late husband's. At the defense table sat Garrett Voss. Even facing the possibility of life in prison, Voss kept an air of arrogant defiance. His defense lawyer, a sharp and expensive attorney named Bryce Langford, paid for by the police union, had told him that no local jury would convict a police officer if they played the split-second decision card. The trial opened with statements from both sides. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Bryce Langford began, pacing in front of the jury box and adjusting his tie. "Police work is not clean or easy. It is dangerous, and it happens in split seconds that can mean life or death." Officer Voss was alone in the dark with a non-compliant suspect who ignored orders and then made a sudden move toward his waistband. It is a tragedy that Major Rains lost his life, but it is not a crime. Officer Voss did exactly what his training told him to do. He acted to protect himself. Attorney General Quentin Hale's opening was short and direct. He stood at the podium and looked straight at the jurors. "The defense wants you to see this as a case about a split-second decision made in fear," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "It is not. It is about a man whose prejudice, ego, and rage led him to pull the trigger, and about a police department that tried to hide the murder of a true hero. We are not going to ask you to imagine what happened that night. We are going to show it to you." The first days of the trial were difficult for the prosecution. The defense worked hard to create doubt, questioning the medical examiner about whether the position of the body could suggest aggression. They brought in use of force experts who spoke about action-reaction times and perceived threats. Voss sat at the table, occasionally leaning over to whisper with his lawyer, a small confident smirk on his face. He believed his union-funded defense was tearing the state's case apart piece by piece. He thought he was winning. Then the state called its key witness. "The state calls Jordan Reyes," Quentin Hale announced. The courtroom doors opened, and the young gas station clerk walked in. He looked nervous in an ill-fitting suit, his hands shaking as he took the oath to tell the truth. Voss's smirk faded. He leaned toward his lawyer. "Who is this kid?" Quentin Hale approached the podium. "Mr. Reyes, where were you working on the night of the incident?" "I was the night cashier at the Chevron station near the interstate," Jordan answered, his voice unsteady. "And were you there when Officer Voss shot Major Rains?" "Yes, sir. I was inside the store." "Did you see what happened?" "I saw everything. I was watching the live camera feed on my tablet." Langford jumped up immediately. "Objection." "Hearsay, Your Honor. The state already agreed that the security recording device was taken by police and was later found corrupted by a power surge." Judge Vale looked at the prosecutor. "Counsel, Your Honor," Quentin Hale said with a calm smile, "the physical recording device was corrupted. Interestingly, that happened after Sergeant Lang took it into custody, but the defense seems to have missed the fact that the Chevron franchise uses a cloud backup system for its cameras." Voss's face went completely white. The pencil in his hand snapped in two. "The state moves to enter Exhibit C into evidence. The unedited high-definition video from the camera above pump number 4, Hale said. "Objection," Langford shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "We were never given this in discovery." "Yes, you were, Mr. Langford," Hale replied smoothly. "It was included in the massive amount of digital evidence we turned over months ago. It was in a file folder labeled Cloud Backup. It is not our fault if your team did not look through all the materials carefully." Judge Vale peered over her glasses at the defense lawyer. "Overruled. Play the tape, Mr. Hale." The lights in the courtroom dimmed, and a large screen came down from the ceiling. The video was completely silent, which only made the images more powerful and disturbing. The jury sat in total stillness as they watched. They saw Julian Rains pumping gas. They saw the police cruiser pull in at an aggressive angle to box him in. They saw Julian raise his hands right away. They saw him speaking calmly to the officer. They saw Voss charge forward, grab the major, and shove him hard against the car. Then, from the clear overhead angle, they saw Julian Rains, slowly and deliberately, reach toward his back pocket with just 2 fingers, nowhere near his waistband. They saw Voss draw his weapon and fire 3 times into Julian's chest. There was no struggle. There was no lunging movement. It was an execution, plain and simple. When the video ended, a heavy gasp filled the courtroom. One of the jurors, a middle-aged woman in the front row, was openly crying. Elena Rains closed her eyes tight, tears running down her face as her attorney put a supportive arm around her. Voss was no longer smirking. He stared at the blank screen, his chest rising and falling fast, his eyes wide like a trapped animal. The blue wall of silence had not just cracked, it had been shattered completely. "Mr. Reyes," Quentin Hale said after a long moment, "after the shooting, did an Oak Creek police officer come into your store?" Jordan swallowed hard. "Yes, a sergeant. He told me to get out of the back room. He took the recording machine. He looked at me, touched the gun on his belt, and told me that if I knew what was good for me, I had not seen anything." The courtroom erupted in shock and outrage. Judge Miranda Vale's gavel came down hard and repeatedly until the noise died down to a stunned murmur. "Order in this courtroom," she commanded, her voice sharp and commanding. "One more outburst and I will clear the room. Mr. Langford, do you wish to cross-examine this witness?" Bryce Langford looked like a man who had just seen his entire strategy collapse. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket with unsteady hands. He had built his career on the gray areas of police encounters and perceived threats. That video had destroyed every bit of gray area in high-definition color. "I have a few questions, Your Honor," he said, his voice much quieter than usual. He walked to the podium and glared at Jordan Reyes. "Mr. Reyes, you claim Sergeant Lang intimidated you. But you did not report any of this to the authorities for some time, did you?" "I was terrified, sir," Jordan answered, his voice shaking but his eyes steady. "A police officer had just killed a man right in front of me, and another officer threatened me to stay quiet. Who exactly was I supposed to report it to?" "The Oak Creek Police Department." A ripple of uneasy laughter and murmurs moved through the jury box. Langford's face turned red. "Furthermore, Mr. Reyes," Langford tried again, desperate to regain ground, "that camera is mounted directly above. It does not show what Officer Voss saw from his position on the ground. You cannot say what Officer Voss believed in that moment, can you?" "I can say what Major Rains did," Jordan replied simply, "and he did nothing that justified being shot and killed. No further questions." Langford snapped and retreated to his table. The prosecution rested its case on that powerful note. The defense was now in a very difficult position. Langford asked for a short recess, which the judge allowed. In the holding room, Langford turned to Garrett Voss. The arrogant look was completely gone from Voss's face. It had been replaced by a hollow, panicked expression. "Garrett, we are in serious trouble," Langford said bluntly, dropping his briefcase on the table. "That video is devastating. We have one move left. You have to take the stand. You have to convince the jury that you experienced tunnel vision and that in the dark and the rain, your mind registered a lethal threat even if it was not really there." The next morning, the tension in the courthouse was even higher. Garrett Voss took the stand. He wore a slightly oversized gray suit, a choice meant to make the big officer appear smaller and more vulnerable. Langford led him gently through his career, emphasizing his years of service and the dangers officers face every day. Then they got to the night of the shooting. Officer Voss, when you approached Major Rains, what was going through your mind? Langford asked in a sympathetic tone. Voss looked straight at the jury, trying to appear open and honest. I was terrified. It was dark. He was a large man. He was not following my orders. When he suddenly turned back toward me and dropped his hand toward his waist, my training kicked in. I experienced tunnel vision and auditory exclusion. I truly believed he was pulling out a firearm. I thought I was never going to see my family again. It was a well-rehearsed performance. A few jurors looked down, seeming uncomfortable with the testimony. Then Attorney General Quentin Hale stood for cross-examination. He did not go to the podium. He picked up a remote control and walked straight toward the jury box, stopping just a few feet from Voss. Mr. Voss, Hale began in a calm but icy tone, you testified that Major Rains was non-compliant. Let us look at the video again. Haley clicked the remote. The screen lowered and the video began to play. Pause it right there, Hale told his assistant. The image froze on Julian Rains, standing with his hands clearly resting on the roof of the SUV. Are his hands visible, Mr. Voss? Voss swallowed. Yes. He was following your order to place his hands on the vehicle, was he not? He was moving around, Voss answered defensively. Play the video at quarter speed, Hale ordered. The footage slowed down. Julian's hands moved slowly and deliberately toward his back pocket. Now, Mr. Voss, you testified that you saw him reach for his waistband. Let us look carefully. Is his hand anywhere near the front of his waistband? From my angle, Voss started. I am not asking about your angle, Hale cut in sharply. I am asking what is actually happening in the video. Is his hand near his front waistband? Voss gripped the sides of the witness stand. No. It is moving toward his back pocket, where a man usually keeps his wallet, Hale noted, where he told you he was reaching to retrieve the identification you had demanded. Let us keep playing, Hale said. The video continued slowly. Voss rushed into the frame and grabbed Julian from behind. He braced himself. He resisted, Voss blurted out, losing control. He steadied himself because you shoved him violently from behind, without any warning or reason, Hale fired back, his voice rising to fill the room. And then in less than 2 seconds, you drew your weapon and fired 3 hollow-point rounds into the chest of an unarmed American soldier. I thought he had a gun, Voss shouted, his face turning red with anger. The polished image of a scared officer cracked to reveal the angry bully underneath. He would not listen to me. You were not there. You do not know what it is like out there with these people. The word these people hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The courtroom went dead silent. Several jurors stared at Voss with open disgust. Elena Rains sat stone-faced, her eyes locked on the man who had killed her husband. No, Mr. Voss, Hale said quietly, turning his back on the witness. I do not know what it is like to shoot a hero in the back because your ego got bruised. No further questions. The defense rested its case later that afternoon. The mood in the courtroom felt final and heavy. Voss's angry outburst on the stand had done enormous damage, but Attorney General Quentin Hale was not done. He had promised Elena Rains not just a conviction, but the complete exposure of the corrupt system that had allowed this to happen. Your Honor, Hale announced the next morning, the state calls a rebuttal witness. We call Sergeant Victor Lang. A gasp came from the police union members in the back of the room. Voss, who had been staring at the table, snapped his head up in shock. Victor Lang walked through the doors. He was not in uniform. He wore a wrinkled brown suit and looked older and more tired than he had on the night of the shooting. He walked past the defense table without looking at Voss. He took the oath and sat down, staring at his hands. Sergeant Lang, Hale began, standing casually near the prosecution table. You have been granted broad immunity by the State Attorney General's office for your actions after the death of Major Rains. Is that correct? Yes, Lang answered hoarsely. He cleared his throat. Yes, sir. You were Officer Voss's direct supervisor. You were the first supervisor on the scene. Tell the jury what you found when you arrived. Lang took a shaky breath. I got to the Chevron station. Major Rains was on the ground. He was gone. I checked him for weapons. He was completely clean. All he had was his military identification. And what did Officer Voss tell you had happened? Lang finally looked up and met Voss's eyes across the room. The sense of betrayal was thick in the air. Garrett, Officer Voss, was pacing, Lang said slowly. I asked him what happened. I told him the man was clean, that he was an army major. I asked him why he had shot. The room was so quiet you could hear the rain on the windows. What was his exact response, Sergeant? Hale pressed. He did not say he saw a gun, Lang confessed, his voice breaking. He said the guy had an attitude. He thought he was untouchable. He would not back down, Victor. I had to show him who runs this town. A wave of shock moved through the gallery. Elena Rains let out a sharp sob and covered her face with her hands. Voss jumped to his feet, his chair falling over behind him. You liar! You lying coward! You piece of garbage! He screamed, spit flying. I covered for you for years. You are selling me out to save your own pension. Bailiffs, restrain the defendant! Judge Vale roared, slamming her gavel down hard. 2 large state troopers moved in and forced Voss back into his seat. Sergeant Lang, Hale continued without missing a beat, did Officer Voss ask you to help cover up the shooting? Lang wiped a tear from his cheek. Yes. We knew the dash cam was blocked, but Garrett knew his body camera had recorded everything. He took the memory card out of his body camera, right there under the canopy, and crushed it under his boot. Then he told me to go inside and get the store's security footage. And did you? Yes. I intimidated the clerk. I took the recording device, put it in the trunk of my cruiser, and later that night I wiped the hard drive clean with a strong magnet before logging it into evidence. Lang looked down at his shaking hands. I traded my integrity to protect the badge. But when I saw that video on the news, when I saw the face of the man who had served this country, I could not live with what I had done anymore. The blue wall of silence had not just cracked. It had collapsed completely in front of the entire country. The cover-up was now fully exposed, reaching all the way up the chain of command. Karma had come for Garrett Voss, and it was coming for the entire Oak Creek Police Department. In the days after Sergeant Victor Lang's devastating testimony, the city of Oak Creek held its breath. When court reconvened for closing arguments, the atmosphere inside the 9th District courtroom was heavy and tense. The gallery was packed beyond capacity. Reporters, civil rights supporters, off-duty officers, and community members sat shoulder to shoulder. Outside, concrete barriers and state troopers kept protesters at a distance. National news cameras were broadcasting live. Bryce Langford stood first for the defense. He looked exhausted, his expensive suit unable to hide how defeated he felt. He had built a successful career working in the gray areas of use of force cases. But the cloud video from the gas station had burned all those gray areas away in clear color. Still, he had to try. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Langford began, his voice somber and pleading. He walked slowly to the jury box and gripped the railing. "You have heard a dramatic and disturbing story. You heard Sergeant Victor Lang sit in that chair and admit to terrible crimes. He confessed to destroying evidence, intimidating a witness, and lying to investigators." Langford paused to let the weight of that confession sink in. Then he pointed at the empty witness stand. But ask yourselves why he suddenly discovered his conscience. He confessed because the state attorney general pressured him with the threat of federal charges and then offered him complete immunity in exchange for his testimony. Sergeant Lang is a man trying to save himself. He is willing to say whatever the prosecution wants him to say to protect his freedom and his pension. You cannot send a decorated officer to prison for the rest of his life based on the testimony of an admitted liar who made a deal to save his own skin. Langford turned and walked back to the defense table, gesturing toward Garrett Voss. Voss sat stiffly, his face pale and sweating, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. "The prosecution wants you to watch that silent video and judge Officer Voss from the comfort and safety of this courtroom," Langford continued, trying to build passion in his voice. "They want you to use the benefit of hindsight." But Officer Voss did not have hindsight. He was alone in the cold rain at night, facing a man he knew nothing about. And let us be honest about who that man was. Major Julian Rains was an Army Ranger. He was a highly trained soldier, conditioned for close combat. When he refused orders to keep his hands still and then reached toward his back pocket, Officer Voss did not see a father or a fellow citizen. He saw a potential threat moving with military precision. Langford wiped sweat from his forehead. You have to look at those few seconds in the rain, not the tragic result, but the split-second reality that officers face every day. If there is even a shadow of a doubt in your minds, even the smallest fraction of doubt, that Officer Voss genuinely believed his life was in danger, the law requires you to acquit. It is a tragedy that Major Rains lost his life. It breaks all of our hearts, but a tragic mistake made in the line of duty is not murder in the second degree. It was a desperate argument that tried to turn the victim's military service against him. When Langford sat down, he did not even glance at his client. Attorney General Quentin Hale took his time standing up. He carried no notes. He simply walked to the center of the room with the quiet power of someone who knew the truth was on his side. "Reasonable doubt," Hale said softly, the words echoing in the silent room. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The defense wants you to believe that Garrett Voss made a mistake, a split-second error born of fear. Hale slowly turned and pointed at the large screen still hanging above the witness stand. It takes about 0.8 of a second to pull the trigger of a Glock, 19 3 times, Hale stated with cold clarity. But it took years of unchecked aggression, years of prejudice, and years of a toxic police culture to put Garrett Voss in that parking lot, believing he had the right to act as judge, jury, and executioner on that asphalt. Hale began to pace, making eye contact with each juror. "Mr. Langford wants you to believe Officer Voss was terrified because Major Rains was an Army Ranger. Let us look at that logic. Major Rains had survived roadside bombs and intense firefights overseas. He was a man who truly understood what a lethal threat looked like. And what did his training teach him to do that night? It taught him to stay calm. It taught him to keep his hands visible. It taught him to speak respectfully, even while being illegally stopped and verbally abused by a man whose ego was out of control. Hale walked over to the prosecution table and placed his hand gently on Elena Raines's shoulder. She sat perfectly still in a sharp black suit, radiating quiet strength that stood in stark contrast to the shaking man at the defense table. Julian Raines bled for the very freedoms we are exercising in this courtroom today, Hale continued, his voice filled with real emotion. He came home to his wife and children only to be gunned down at a gas station by a man sworn to protect him. And what did Officer Voss do immediately after? Did he try to save the life he had just taken? Did he show any remorse? No. He crushed the memory card from his body camera under his boot. He conspired with his sergeant to destroy evidence. He spent months trying to smear the name of a dead American hero. Hale turned back to the jury, his expression hard as stone. Sergeant Lang did not create that video. The video is the undeniable truth. It does not show fear. It shows malice. It shows murder. Do not let this man hide behind the badge he disgraced. Return a verdict that tells the Raines family, that tells the Oak Creek Police Department, and that tells the entire nation that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. Hale sat down. The only sound in the room was Elena Raines quietly crying, clutching her late husband's silver dog tags in her hand. Judge Miranda Vale adjusted her glasses. Her face was calm, but her voice carried sharp authority as she gave the jury their final instructions. She carefully explained the elements of murder in the second degree, official misconduct, and tampering with evidence. Later that morning, the bailiff swore in the jury, and they were sent out to deliberate. The long wait began. Many legal experts on television predicted it would take days because of the serious charges and the usual reluctance to convict police officers. In a private waiting room, Elena Raines sat with attorney Damian Holt and Attorney General Quentin Hale. They drank bitter coffee from paper cups. Elena did not speak. She simply stared at the clock on the wall, hoping for some kind of justice. 3 floors below in the holding cells, Garrett Voss sat on a steel bench. The arrogant smirk was long gone, replaced by a sickening dread. He was sweating through his clothes. He paced the small cell, feeling the walls close in. He realized with painful clarity that his union was not coming to save him. The police chief was not calling in favors. The blue wall had collapsed, and he was left exposed. They expected to wait for days. They did not have to. Hours later, the intercom in the judge's chambers buzzed sharply. The bailiff answered, listened, and turned to Judge Vale. The jury had reached a verdict. The air in the 9th District courtroom felt frozen. As the heavy door opened and the 12 jurors filed back to their seats, a crushing silence fell over everyone. Garrett Voss was brought back to the defense table by 2 state troopers who now looked at him as a criminal, not a fellow officer. Voss's face was ashen. He was trembling, his eyes darting around the room looking for help that was not there. His wife's seat in the 2nd row was empty. She had filed for divorce weeks earlier and taken their daughters far away. He was completely alone. Across the aisle, Elena Raines sat still between Damian Holt and Quentin Hale. She held her breath, her thumb tracing the letters on her husband's dog tags. Judge Miranda Vale took her seat on the high bench. She looked out over the packed room to make sure there was order, then nodded to the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson, a retired middle school history teacher named Martha Higgins, stood up holding a single sheet of paper. Her hands were steady. We have, Your Honor. The defendant will rise, Judge Vale ordered. Bryce Langford had to help Voss to his feet. Voss swayed, his knees weak under the weight of what was coming. On the first count of the indictment, murder in the second degree, Judge Vale's voice filled the silent room. How do you find? Martha Higgins looked straight at Garrett Voss, her voice clear and firm. We find the defendant, Garrett Voss, guilty. A collective gasp and shudder moved through the gallery. Elena Raines closed her eyes as tears streamed down her cheeks. Quentin Hale placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. On the second count, official misconduct, guilty. On the third count, tampering with physical evidence, guilty. The words hit Voss like physical blows. His legs gave out completely. He collapsed backward, his chair crashing to the floor. He curled up, covering his face with his hands as a broken, pathetic sound escaped him. The arrogant predator who had ruled the streets of Oak Creek was gone, replaced by a shattered man who understood his life was over. Bryce Langford took a slow step away from his client, defeated and knowing his career would never recover from this loss. Bailiffs, get the defendant on his feet, Judge Vale ordered, banging her gavel to quiet the growing noise. Two large troopers hauled Voss up, gripping his arms tightly. Officer Voss, Judge Vale said, leaning forward, her eyes burning with righteous anger that held everyone's attention. In my many years on this bench, I have rarely seen a more callous, arrogant, and cowardly abuse of power. You took a sacred oath to protect and serve your community. Instead, you acted like a predator in a uniform. You took a devoted father, a loving husband, and a decorated American soldier from this world over nothing more than a bruised ego, and then, like a coward, you used the badge you had dishonored to try to bury the truth. Judge Vale picked up her gavel, her grip tight. Normally, I would set a separate sentencing hearing, but given the overwhelming and undeniable video evidence and the clear danger your complete lack of remorse poses to the public, I am using my authority under state law to sentence you today. Society cannot allow you to spend another minute as a free man. Garrett Voss, for the cold-blooded murder of Major Julian Raines, I sentence you to 25 years to life in the maximum security wing of the state penitentiary. You will serve this sentence without the possibility of parole until the mandatory minimum time has been completed. You are remanded immediately to the custody of the Department of Corrections. Bang! The gavel came down like a final period on Garrett Voss's freedom. Handcuffs were snapped onto his wrists. As the troopers dragged him toward the side door, Voss looked back over his shoulder at the gallery. He saw no sympathetic faces. He saw disgusted stares from the public. He saw the cameras of the national media. And finally, he saw Elena Raines. She was looking right through him, a look of deep and unbreakable peace on her tear-streaked face. But karma did not stop with Garrett Voss. His conviction was only the beginning. Armed with Sergeant Victor Lang's testimony and the recovered evidence, Attorney General Quentin Hale launched a major investigation into the entire Oak Creek Police Department. The consequences came quickly and hard. Months later, Chief Preston Ward was indicted on federal charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. 8 other officers who had helped build and protect the Wall of Silence were stripped of their badges. Their pensions were taken away, and they received long federal prison sentences. The corrupt system that had protected Garrett Voss and terrorized the community for years was torn down completely. Its ashes were scattered by the power of the truth. Justice is rarely a straight or simple path. It is often a painful road carved through tragedy and loss. The sentencing of Garrett Voss to 25 years behind bars could never bring back Major Julian Rains. It could never return a father to his children or a husband to his wife. But his sacrifice was not without meaning. The clear, recorded truth of his murder shone a bright light on the deep corruption inside the police department and forced a painful reckoning that changed the city forever. Karma is not just some distant balancing of scales. In this courtroom, it was the relentless pursuit of truth by people who refused to be silenced. Julian Rains lived his entire life with unshakable honor, and in the end, it was that same unyielding honor that brought down the monsters who had been hiding in the dark.